Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fit Pro Show. Emily here in Fort Collins, Colorado. I have David, as always, down in Houston. And then we actually have Jessica Green, our registered dietitian down in Houston as well, joining us today to talk about all things nutrition. I know 2 episodes ago, we had talked and gone over kind of the My Plate recommendations, a little sneak preview, talking about a little bit of nutrition stuff. And as we had mentioned in that episode, David and I can only talk so much underneath our scope. And so we thought it would be fun to kind of take that conversation and take it to the next level and bring on Jessica. So Jessica, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, I listened to that episode. It was a really great episode. And, we, in preparation for today, I know we kind of talked about it a little bit. And, that plate, used to be called the plate method. And it's been around for a long time. It's actually one of the ways dietitians back all the way to the 40s and 50s and beyond taught how to eat for those who were newly diabetic. And so it's been around. It's withstood the test of time. It's not very exciting, I'll give you that much, to think about it that way, but it's very powerful. It's a very powerful tool, and it's a very difficult tool to really look and reassess what's on your plate. But it's a fun way to also think about portions and portion control without getting like, oh my gosh, is this a cup of this? Is this 4 ounces? Is this whatever, right? So just to kind of recap, we have our plate, and we have to use a little bit of imagination every now and then because, we don't always eat, and nice, half a plate of non-starchy vegetables, a quarter of a plate of grains and starchy vegetables, and a quarter plate of our protein. We don't eat, well, most of us, I guess, I don't know, maybe some of us do, I know my kids do, and I do too, I think sometimes, where we eat nice and neat little, sections. But when we just look at our plate, just thinking of the plate being more of those colorful non-starchy vegetables, those are your low calorie, but extremely high nutrient value foods, right? And then when we think of our starches, our carbohydrates, our grains, we think that our grains, our tortillas, our breads, our pastas, our rice, our potatoes, our peas, sweet potatoes, what else? I feel like I'm missing some other stuff, but all of that, it has to share, like a quarter of the plate or a quarter of the meal, it has to share that real estate, okay? And then the remaining quarter of our plate being that protein. Now, we all have different needs, so that can shift, but that's just kind of a general guideline. And y'all did really, really fantastic explaining it.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a really good synopsis of kind of some of the things that we talked about. I know when we met earlier this week, we had some ideas for you just from what we've heard from, talking to clients, talking to folks on here, all that kind of stuff. And the first one that comes to mind for me is we were talking about training and how you fuel yourself for either cardiovascular or weight training, kind of what that timing of that looks like for people and what types of foods. Can you kind of shed a light on that for us?
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to ask y'all, what do the fit professionals, what do y'all do to fuel when y'all go do your workouts? Not necessarily your teaching, even though you should be fueling up. Spoiler alert, y'all should be fueling still. But for when y'all do y'all's workouts, what do y'all do?
David, do you want me to go first?
Emily, go for it, and then I'll go.
All right, cool. So for me, whether I'm weight training or cardiovascular, I don't really like to have much in my stomach. If I do, it's like some fruit, right? I'll have like a little bit of fruit to put in my stomach beforehand and lots of water. And post workout, I like to go right into a protein shake and then kind of match that with, again, some fruit, and then maybe even like, I don't know, I like to do pretzels or a granola bar or something like that, or I'll do like yogurt and fruit in that yogurt and then some grains on it.
Love it.
And that's like my go-to. I usually have that with the protein shake, and then I'll wait about 30 to 45 minutes and I'll have an actual meal where it's, I'll have whatever it is I'm eating for the day, chicken and rice, or sweet
Whatever dinner or
potatoes.
lunch you're gonna have.
Exactly,
Like.
whatever that is. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's usually what my post meal looks like. I started dabbling a little bit into like intermittent fasting, so I like to do my workouts while I'm fasted too, and then I'll break my fast right after that. So it's a little bit different each day, but for me, that's kind of how I like, because I have like I don't know, I have a weird stomach, so I can't have too much in when I go into it, but I also can't go in an empty stomach because I'll be lightheaded and I won't have the energy that I need. Now I know David is a little bit different. Why don't you go ahead and talk about that, David?
Yeah, there's similarities and differences from what Emily said there for sure, because she does a lot of stuff right, and I probably do a lot of stuff right, and there's not necessarily like a right or wrong for everybody either. Just what kind of fits best. But for me, if I'm doing strength training, for sure I have to have a big meal before. Usually, I mean, right up to it, not like 15 minutes before, but maybe 45 minutes before or an hour before, I have a nice solid meal where I feel like I can get a really good workout in. And I do my cardiovascular training always after I do weight training. So it is going to be a big session when I do that. I hardly ever just go do like a cardio workout. It's usually both of those variables in there. So I need a good amount of stuff. I usually will do, a big carbohydrate meal, plenty of protein, a little bit less, it's smaller on the fat before, just in the pre and post workout period. I still make sure that I'm getting those essential fats throughout the day, but definitely making sure that I have those carbs. And it sounds like Emily too has a little bit more times where she's eating throughout the day, maybe a little bit more like small snacks. I'm that person. It's like 3 big meals throughout the day, and that's what keeps me satiated and fueled.
Yeah.
And I've seen David have those big meals, so.
I'm
Witness.
usually like a 2 big meal person, because that's just kind of what fits in with my fasting regimen. But I agree with having that big meal, especially if you're gonna add in weight training and the cardio. And I'm the same way. If I'm gonna do both, I will do my cardio afterwards, so I have all my energy saved for kind of that weightlifting. But pretty interesting stuff. And I know, Jessica, you could talk more about this, but everybody's different. So I mean, it kind of depends on like what you prefer. And if this would be my suggestion, if you haven't found a good regimen, play around with it.
And I think there's 2 things to be said. I kind of made a note to cover these 2 things. It's different for every body, literally our body, because we all have different GI systems, so we can all tolerate different things versus, we have Emily who going into a session or going into a working out in an empty stomach feels better for her, versus David going in on that empty stomach would not feel good. And the same thing could be said for if you are an endurance athlete, or maybe you're going in, you might want that smaller meal, right? So it's different because our GI systems are all different, and it's different for what type of activity we're doing as well, right? Is it our, workout, or is it, are we training for that marathon? Are we training for that ultra marathon? Are we training for that MS 150? What are we training for? Okay. Let's get a little technical really, really quick here. We do, regardless of the activity, we always want to make sure we go in with a pretty full tank. We don't have to be over full where we feel stuffed, right? But we do want to have glycogen. Okay. Let's get some vocab words. That glycogen, we do want to have our glycogen tank topped off. That's our energy. And we get that from our carbohydrates. Okay. So our carbohydrates are our fuel for that glycogen. It's the liver. There's stuff happening in the liver. Okay. Our liver wants that. Okay. liver's on the other side. Sorry, wrong side. I'm looking at myself in the camera and I'm like, wait.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so we want to top that off. So regardless of whatever type of activity we're doing, we do want to top that off. Technically, when we start talking about what we should have or what we're going to do, we tend to use kind of a 60 minutes as that cutoff, meaning if we're going to be working out for 60 minutes or a little bit more, or if we're doing maybe a high intensity interval training, that's a very intense training, even though it might be less than 60 minutes, we do want to think of having a little bit of that snack or that meal. We want to top off that glycogen energy tank at about 30 to 45 minutes. Not exact, right? We saw that with David and Emily. David wants his, one little bit like an hour, kind of sounded like, right? So we do want that, okay? So whatever that looks like, we do want to have that energy topped off, and we want to have that carbohydrate, whether it's in the form of rice, chicken and rice, right? Or it's in the form of, we want an orange, okay? We do want that carbohydrate. That's that quick energy. And we want to pair that with a little bit of protein. Again, depending on what type of activity you're doing would kind of dictate how much protein, but we do want a little bit of that protein, okay? That helps us to feel full. It also helps us to spare protein, so that way we are able to kind of repair and recover. But we're looking at about a 30 to 45 minute window before you go and work out. And to be honest with you, fluid is probably more important, especially if you're going to go out for a run, you're going to go out and do some cardio. Fluid, okay? Just in case we missed that, hydration, okay?
Yeah, I was going to point on that one next.
Yes. And then, so then let's go, okay, so that's pre. Also with pre-workout, before we go and work out, and the same is going to go for hydration. You're going to hear me say this again. Hydration and pre-workout, that's not something that happens necessarily within that 30 to 45 minutes. That also is, okay, what did you have for breakfast? Did you have a good night's sleep? Did you have lunch? What kind of foods did you have throughout the day? I will say that we do want to be a little bit, especially for endurance activities, we want to be a little bit lower on that fat just because of that upset stomach. Okay, it might lead to, cramping and whatnot. Okay, so that's pre. Let me go really quick to post-workout. We have a sweet spot of about, 30 to 45 minutes, right? Where we do want that protein. Okay, that's like, we do want that. And again, we want that protein and carbohydrates. We want those carbohydrates to top off the tank, okay? To top off that glycogen tank, so that way it gives us the fuel and the energy and recovers, and it spares protein. Protein sparing is kind of a big thing. We want that protein to go break down those amino acids, and those amino acids go do their thing, whether it's to rebuild, recover, all that good stuff. But we want that within that 30 to 45 minutes. And that can look like different things. That could be that protein shake. That could be nuts and yogurt. It could look like a piece of cheese. It could look like chocolate milk. Okay, it could look like different things. Again, depending on what our stomach can handle. Okay, and then after we want to have, within an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, we want to have our, like Emily goes and has her chicken and rice, right? Then chicken, rice, and we're going to throw some non-starchy vegetables in there, right? Yep. Yeah. So then we're going to go and do that. Does that make sense, y'all?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely.
Good. Yeah. What
So
other
I think,
questions do we have?
yeah, so I think where that led us, we were just talking about hydration so much. I know dehydration is a big thing that we talked about.
Yeah.
So what do you tell people as far as the amount of water? I guess it can be from other things too, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they can have throughout the day, they should have throughout the day, because I'm sure many people come to you and they're just feeling kind of off, and that might be one of the things that is off for them. What do you usually tell them?
Definitely. Great question. And then I'm going to frame this question in terms of our athletics and sports performance, right? And we have to do a couple of things. Yes, we think of the 8 glasses of water a day. That's amazing. Keep up with that. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But yes, fluid I'm gonna go with fluid. Hydration is more than just water. It's the water content of our fruits and our vegetables, watermelon, cantaloupe, grapes, pineapple, right? Our leafy greens. We think of the water content in there. We think of this bowl of soup we had for lunch. That counts towards our fluid, okay? And we do have to be mindful of that because our fluid needs will shift. David, you and I are here in Houston, and Christy's in Houston. Stephen, you're up in the Pacific Northwest, and Emily's up in the mountains. All of our fluid needs are going to be a little bit different based on our climate as well.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah, remember, we're here hot, humid Houston. When we're running, or maybe we're out for a walk and we're just sweating, our fluid needs shift a little bit where we might need a little bit more attention to our electrolytes. So folks up in the Pacific Northwest or in the mountains where the air is drier, we might have to be more intentional with our fluid needs because we may not feel sweaty because it's dry.
Yeah.
We may not feel thirsty because again, it's dry. Think of a cyclist. Cyclists are cycling. They may not necessarily feel thirsty because they may or may not feel sweat because, it's evaporating, right? So we might have to be a little bit more intentional with it. Now, in terms of determining your hydration status, there's different things we can do, and there's different technicalities we can do in terms of weighing and all of this stuff. My general rule of thumb, okay, and y'all will never look at lemonade or apple juice the same ever again after this. But when you go to the bathroom, first have your first urine in the morning, okay? First one. We want that urine to look kind of like a pale lemonade. That's telling you that you're on the right path for adequate hydration day in, day out. Because the other thing with hydration is medication, depending on any type of medications we may be taking, diuretics or any statins, etc. So that plays a role. So your first urine of the day, we want to aim for that pale lemonade. If we have days upon days where we're kind of at that apple juice color, then we're a little consistently being dehydrated, okay? And then on the flip side, when we have days in, days out of where it's clear, like looks like water, then we might be a little overhydrated, especially if we have any kind of swelling happening as well. So use that first urine of the day of the morning as that guide of your day in, day out over under hydration.
Yeah, that's a good little tip for sure. I have noticed that ever since I learned that tip, I always look at that. I normally wake up actually too much because I drink a lot of water throughout the night too. But yeah, that's a good way to kind of look and see where you're at and how you have to kind of, measure your intake throughout the day.
Yep.
I didn't think that when you drank too much water that you became bloated. I thought it was the other way around. If you weren't drinking enough and eating a lot of salt, that you became bloated.
Well, when you get a little overhydrated, you kind of are messing up your potassium and sodium gradient. It's hard to do. So it's hard to get to the point where you're getting a little bit of some fluid retention, where you're getting a little bit of that bloating. It can happen when you're in hot, humid climates, is when we tend to see it. Or if you're having issues, especially if you're in a sporting event and you are having issues urinating, okay, those can all be kind of signs for that. But you can have that bloating, that swelling on both ends of that spectrum. It has to do with what's going on with your potassium and your sodium.
Okay. Yeah, and it's good to have all three of those examples where it should be if you're overhydrated, underhydrated, because I think everybody kind of thinks about the underhydrated, but you can be overhydrated all the time, I guess, too. So just having balance in all things, really, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Jessica, so on that note, this is something that I hear from friends, family, clients, is that they don't like water. It's too bland for them. And so what I always suggest is squeezing a lemon or like a lime, or even just kind of letting some fruit sit in some water. What are your thoughts, feels on that?
Go for it. Also be mindful of temperature. Some folks prefer it, lukewarm. Some
definitely
want cold. Go for it.
yeah.
Throw frozen fruits in it. You know, if you think of those spa waters, right? Those aren't for, you know, the spa or for fancy meetings. That's to get you some frozen fruits, throw it in there. Definitely.
Yeah.
There's
Cool.
that's a-okay. Go for it. And you can get creative. I mean, you can put what was it that I did? It was pretty good. Because I don't like mint. I don't like mint and I don't like mint and cucumbers in my water. I don't like it. But I did like strawberries and basil. That was a good combination.
I've
I
done
did
that
strawberry
too.
basils and oranges. Yeah, that's a
Oranges,
good
yeah.
one.
It is good. Yeah, definitely. It
Yeah.
just kind of, you know, gives like, I like water. I've always liked
Yeah.
water. So I don't have an issue with that, but I hear that complaint a lot from people. They're just like, it's so boring. And so that's what I always had suggested. And it tastes good. I mean, it gives that little natural flavor to it. Yeah.
Mhm. And you can add a splash of coconut water, unflavored coconut water,
Oh, I love
or mix it
coconut
up
water.
with coconut water. You know, I always suggest unflavored just because some brands will use added sugars for their flavoring, and so we don't want the added sugars per se. But unflavored will give just enough of that smidge of sweet. Plus, you'll get a little electrolytes and magnesium in there.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm. Good question, y'all. And keep on asking the questions in the chat box or unmute yourself. Any questions, feel free to continue. I know go ahead.
So if we talk about hydration or dehydration status, I also think we should talk about alcohol too, because I know that's definitely well, it's a liquid, but it's not gonna hydrate you very well, right? And you can't be a healthy person and have a healthy relationship with alcohol. I just want to know maybe your thoughts about how much or how often somebody should be implementing that if they enjoy it.
Great question. And it reminds me, my son did my youngest, my 9-year-old did a little 5K cross country in a state park here in Texas. And he got to finish and he got a little medal. Well, before he got the medal, they asked him and they were being kind of teasing him, either got a beer or the medal for your finishing. Either got a beer sign or the medal. And I was like, we're getting the medal. But it is just one of those things. Usually at running events, there's beer at the end. Anyway, the guidelines are that for women, we get 1 serving of drink, which could be a 12-ounce beer, or we're looking at, 4 ounces of spirits. And men, 1 a day. Okay, and these are per day. So 2 for women, 1 for men per day. However, there's a lot of talk happening right now for that actually to change. Okay, we do need to be mindful of a couple things for alcohol. Is really we're talking about we're getting calories, but we're not getting nutrients. So we get calories from fat, protein, and carbohydrates, but we also get vitamins and minerals and all that good stuff, right? With alcohol, we're not getting that. So enjoy it. Remember, when we do consume alcohol, focus on the experience, right? We're usually out and about, or we're maybe kind of using it to unwind. Focus on that experience. And that will help kind of limit the amount. We'll still get that satisfaction. And then on the flip side, there are some, benefits to some. We think of the red wines, we think of some of the tannins, and we think of that Mediterranean diet. But we're still looking at that half a glass per day kind of concept. So we still have to kind of think about it in that bigger picture. And remember, you also get extra, especially if we're doing cocktails, we're getting extra syrups, simple syrups, sugars, and all that good stuff in there as well.
Yeah, that'll bite you too if it's a sugary mixer or whatever. Pick your poison, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I like the way that. What was that?
Say that one more time, Becky, please.
Why can women have more alcohol than men?
I think Jessica, you
Becky,
flipped it.
I flipped that. Thank you for catching that, Becky. Yes.
No, I don't want to catch that. I like the idea that we can drink more than
You shouldn't have asked. You're like, Jessica said.
Jessica said, yeah, no, I flipped that. My apologies. Yes. Oh yeah, no, it's flipped.
I think red wine, little dark chocolate. I think that should be mandatory.
Yeah, right. Self-care.
We got flavonoids in both of those, actually.
Yeah,
Sure
and I like the
does.
way that you framed it of like focusing on the experience and like the moment rather than just pounding them down.
Yeah.
That's a good way to kind of go into it having that mindset of like
Yeah.
enjoy the company, enjoy the conversations that are going on, and don't really focus on, how much you're trying to indulge, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
we've talked about mindfulness in a bunch of different ways on this show, and it doesn't just apply to meditation or
Mhm.
food. It can apply to alcohol and many different parts of your life. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's a really good point. Um, One other question that came up too was maybe the nutritional needs or recommendations by age. So as people start getting a little bit older, do those I guess the overall calories or the macronutrients that you're taking in, do those change over time?
Love this question. And I was so excited when we were prepping for this because we've actually are finally really looking into nutrition in the lifespan. We've always done that, but I don't know if y'all are aware, we have what are called the US dietary guidelines, and they come out every 5 years. Well, the 2020-2025 dietary guidelines is the first one to include pregnancy to older adults. We've always kind of focused in at those 19 to 60-year-olds, but we finally have pregnancy, lactation, infant, toddlers, child, adolescent. We have the whole span. And that's really important because our needs do change. They change when we get in, for women, when we start getting to peri and into menopause and beyond. Men, the same thing. When we start getting into 55 to 65-year-old, that's when things like our muscle mass may start decreasing. Okay. Where for women, we get into our 40s and our 50s and we start getting into the time of menopause. That's when we tend to start seeing our muscle mass decrease and our fat mass increase, which is what we don't want to have happen, right? So we see our needs changing. We see our overall calories because of that shift in muscle to fat mass. We start seeing decreases in our metabolism. It's just for women, sometimes it tends to happen sooner. It doesn't mean for men it doesn't happen. It just, you'll catch up, and it catches up quickly, and it happens. That change in metabolism happens quicker in men, which just happens at an older age. So we start seeing our nutritional calorie needs, our macronutrients, all those needs tend to decrease. However, what's been interesting is that there's been a lot of studies happening where we see these calorie needs decrease, but we consume more calories. And there's some social aspect to that, meaning as we get older, we may have more disposable income, so we might eat out more. We might engage in alcohol more, which increases our calories. So we start seeing kind of not just biological things, but sociological things happening as well. Now, I will tell you, oh my gosh, I want to get this across. One really important thing to help keep that fat mass low and keep that muscle mass high, and to help keep that furnace, aka our metabolism, going. Okay, so we keep our calorie needs. Okay, sleep, stress, all of that good stuff. Good nutrition day in, day out, our food groups. However, one really important one is strength training. That's an incredibly important one. Yes, for men, women, for all of us. Okay, that really helps to preserve that lean muscle mass, right? It helps keep, and maybe we can build, yay, but it helps keep that. And it's really important for our bone, keep our bone density up for both men and women. Okay, it's not just women who fall and break their hips, it's men as well.
Yeah, and so what I'm getting from that is that yes, our bodies change over time and have different needs over time, but we can always combat that process by doing the right things. So you're not helpless. Like the things that we're talking about every week about, strength training and nutrition and sleep and just positive habits, those are all going to combat some of those things that come along with age.
Exactly. Love it.
Wonderful. Well, we're hitting time here, but that flew by as always. Thank you so much, Jessica, for hopping on with us and kind of breaking down some of those questions that we were wondering about. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure everybody else did too. Yeah, thanks, Christy. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back next week at the same time, and we'll get into what me and Emily love, strength training, a little bit more. All right. Thanks, y'all. Take care.
Awesome.
See you,
Thanks, you
everyone.
guys.